Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my Thriller Thursday series. Today I'm going to be talking about the unsolved case of the Black Dahlia. So before I start, I'd just like to say that I mean no offence by making these videos. I'm just doing them for educational and awareness purposes. So the Black Dahlia, also known as Elizabeth Short, was murdered in 1947. So the Black Dahlia was actually a nickname Elizabeth had, and it was given to her by her friends, as there was a film around the time of this murder called The Blue Dahlia, and her friends called Elizabeth the Black Dahlia because she liked to wear a lot of black. But like I said, her official name is Elizabeth Short, but she did like to be called Beth. So she was born on the 9th of July in 1924 and was originally from Massachusetts but moved to Hollywood to try and become a big actress and find fame. So her parents were called Cleo and Phoebe Short, and her dad Cleo actually owned a business building miniature golf courses, which were sort of starting to become popular around that time. So he was doing really well with this business up until 1929, until his depression caught up with him and he actually abandoned his family, Elizabeth, her 4 siblings and their mum. He actually faked his suicide so they wouldn't come after him and moved away and started a new life. One day in the future, Elizabeth actually received a letter from her dad explaining what he had done and why, and also apologised. And after this they did continue to write to each other, but her mum never forgave him and never wanted him to return. When she was a little older, she was actually invited to go and live with her dad in California, as this is where he was living. And she thought it may have been a good idea, as she could have gone and found the fame that she wanted. So she packed her bags and moved out to California. When they did live with each other, things didn't go as well as they had planned, and her dad thought that she was lazy, that she was just living off of him, didn't do anything around the house, so actually kicked her out. She started living with other people in California, basically started sofa surfing, and everyone else said the same, that she didn't really do much to help, she didn't really have an income coming in, and she was just lazy. One man she stayed with was called Robert Red Manley, and he claimed that neither of them had a relationship with each other, as he had a wife and children, but they did see each other quite often, and he was actually the last person to see her. On the 8th of January 1947, Elizabeth got a lift to Biltmore Hotel, and Robert actually drove her there. So when they got there, they actually had dinner together and then went back to Elizabeth's room. Robert slept in the bed and Elizabeth actually slept in the chair, because according to Robert, Elizabeth didn't actually feel well. The next day was the last he saw of her when he left the hotel. She was in the sort of lobby reception area and was making phone calls. On January the 15th, 1947, there was a lady called Betty Persinger who left her home in Los Angeles to walk to the shop with her daughter. They were walking up the street and she saw what she believed to be a mannequin, but it actually turned out to be a body. And it was a rather messed up body. So the sides of her mouth were cut into, looking as if she had a sort of Joker smile. Her body was also cut in half and all the blood had been drained from her body as well. And because of this she was extremely pale, which is why Betty believed that she was a mannequin. Once she realised this was in fact a body, she grabbed her daughter and ran to the nearest house, where they called 911. When 911 arrived, there was a massive crowd around the body, so they covered it up straight away. They took fingerprints and were able to determine that the body was in fact Elizabeth Short's. Through other testing, they were able to see that Elizabeth hadn't been sexually assaulted and this case is still unsolved to this day. Police believed that Elizabeth was murdered somewhere else and was moved to this location, as there was no remaining blood on her body or in the surrounding area. They believe that this may have been set up for someone to find. Elizabeth's dad refused to identify the body, so her mum had to fly out to identify her. Elizabeth's mum actually found out about the murder through getting contacted by a news reporter who actually said that they needed information on Elizabeth as she had won a beauty competition. And then at the end of this phone call they told her the real reason why and that she had actually been murdered. 9 days after Elizabeth's body was found, a letter was sent to the police. This letter contained magazine cutouts of words which read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." So whoever sent this is clearly trying to make sure that their handwriting doesn't get detected, and they also wiped over the letter with gasoline to remove any of their traces. So this message also came with some of her belongings, which was her birth certificate, social security number, pictures that belonged to her, and also an old address book. After this, they also sent one more letter to the police, which read, "I've had my fun with the police, Black Dahlia Avenger," but no one ever handed themselves in. Now, there are a couple suspects, one being Robert Manley, as he was the last person to see her. But he had already returned to San Diego and her body was found much later. He also passed a polygraph test, which is a lie detector test, and then was ruled out completely as a suspect after this. But his life did go downhill from here, as so many people believe that it was him who did this, and his wife eventually had to put him in a mental hospital because he basically lost his mind over the whole thing. Another suspect was Joseph DeMays, who had claimed to be out drunk with Elizabeth Shaw just before her death, a few days before. There is also a third suspect, George Hodel. People believe that he actually did this as his son Steve has gone into a big investigation to try and prove that his dad did do this. He said in his childhood home there was a locked room which no one was allowed to enter, and he actually never found out what was in there. George actually went to medical school, which is why his son believes that he would be able to surgically dismember a body and drain it of his blood. George actually had 5 wives and 11 children, and his son Steve actually told people that George had a picture of Elizabeth Shaw. When this picture was first examined, they were 85% sure that it was Elizabeth in the photo, but more recently it had been re-examined in 2014, and it's now 95% certain that it is her. They also compared George's handwriting samples, which were actually very similar, but it had never actually been confirmed. Also, before George died, police did set him up with hidden microphones to sort of spy on him, and they did hear him say, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they can't prove anything now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore as she is dead." Also, Steve went back to his childhood home where he believed that his dad would have killed Elizabeth Short. They returned with police dogs, and these police dogs picked up the scent of dead people pretty much everywhere, and it wasn't guaranteed that this was from Elizabeth Short. He could have killed many other people and could have in fact been a serial killer. And that is everything on this case. Let me know down below what you think and if there's any other cases you'd like me to cover. Also give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy, and also subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.